Every day you use your laptop, computer or smartphone to interact with internet, and you do so directly through an operating system. There are many operating systems including Microsoft Windows, Apple Mac OS X, Apple iOS, Google Android, variations of Linux and so on. So all of them use hardware. Let's see if I can enlarge the font. So all of them use hardware. You need the service, which includes like your operating system electronics, your computer electronics or your mobile electronics, all the chips and all that. On top of that hardware, there's software. So you have software on top. Now this software we don't directly run applications on the hardware. Instead, what is beneath the two is the operating system, which is a computer software that interacts with the hardware and lets applications use the programs or the apps run on top of that. So I could make them a different color just for clarity. So you have the operating system beneath here, which can be like Windows, Android, Mac OS X, iOS, Linux and so on. Hardware, we specifically talk about, for example, the CPU, the processor, memory, screen, keyboard, that kind of stuff. And apps here are what you use daily, programs like Chrome, Firefox, Office, WhatsApp, Telegram or whatever you use on your computer. So the operating system is a layer in between. And this layer connects with all the hardware and has complete access over the hardware. Now sometimes there's misconfigurations on the operating system level, which then allow you to gain more access into the computer or to manipulate the system itself. And there are many different operating systems, and how to exploit them will completely depend on the type of system. For example, Linux has a completely different file system than Windows. And so it really depends on the system itself, which kind of operating system security you have. So there are several things you can attack with an operating system. For example, it might be weak passwords, right? So it can be that the system is configured to have weak passwords. So that is one of the vulnerabilities you could have with the operating system. So another vulnerability, so weak passwords, maybe like simple passwords or commonly used passwords. So what attackers will do is to try with millions of passwords to see if there's a match. For example, you can have passwords like 123456, QWERTY, password 1111, and so on. And what the hacker will do is you just have like huge databases of commonly used passwords, like 14 million passwords, and then try to get access to the system using those passwords. It can be weak file permissions. So for example, maybe some files shouldn't be configured to read, like a password file. So weak file permissions is another one. That can be a way to have like complete access to the system or to get more access into the system. Then there is malicious programs. So think about a virus or a Trojan which gives you complete access to the computer. So there are many ways that you can mess with the operating system, right? Bad configurations or malicious programs, and sometimes even a way to access into the system can be operating system code itself. Sometimes the operating system has vulnerabilities that you can exploit. For example, in the old Windows 98, you could just press the escape key to bypass the password screen, which obviously doesn't work anymore in any modern version of Windows, but that happens in that version. So let's do a demonstration of this. So what we'll try is to gain access using weak passwords. And we know that the user Alice is using the computer. So we'll try to exploit weak passwords to gain access to the operating system. And so typically on any Linux system, this is a Linux system here, there's an administrator called root, and there might be one or more users. In this case, we know that Alice is one of the users of the system. Now, in order to gain access to a Linux system, typically the protocol SSH is used. So SSH, which you can then type the username and the IP address, so the internet or the network address of the computer, which you can see using ipadder-show. So that's 192.168.8.206, and you'll see then it requests password to access the computer. So, for example, we can try just random passwords, and you'll see permission denied. So what we can do is just one by one try passwords. If there is a weak password, we should eventually find it, right? So let's try some of the common passwords. So I have a small list here. Let me hide the small list here, common txt, which is a list of common passwords. So we can just try them one by one to see if we gain access. So let me just make this a bit smaller. So we'll try 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and you'll see that's not the passwords. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, the second password in the list. Then we'll try the next password in the list. And the fourth one in the list. And you'll see we got access. And so when you have bad passwords or commonly used passwords, you can gain access into the system. So when you have these weak passwords, you can get access into the operating system. Now obviously, what hackers will do is, instead of doing this by hand, use a tool called Hydra, which you can see more about in this course, and Hydra will go through a list of passwords automatically. And for example, one of such lists is the rock.txt file. Let me just show you. This is the first 100 lines of the rock.txt file. And this file actually contains 14 million passwords. So you'll see, I was just showing the first 100, and these are the first 10,000 of this file, and it contains 14 million passwords. It's rock.txt. And we can do this kind of attack that we did automatically using a tool called Hydra. So it automatically goes through this list of whichever amount of passwords you give it to. So for example, this is like a tiny list of just 20 passwords, but the list I just showed you has 14 million, and it will just go and connect and type those passwords automatically one by one using that tool. So that tool is called Hydra, which we'll get into more in this course. So you'll see you can specify a password list and what you want to attack. So that gave us basic access into the system. So now if you this is shell access, so you can type command like who am I. You'll see you are the user Alice. You can list the files in the target's computer directory. You can basically control the whole computer. So let's see if that's still here. So this is the victim's computer, and for example, we can go into the desktop directory. Okay, there is no desktop directory. We can create files. Which directory? Okay, it's in the wrong directory. So you'll see it created that file. So we can completely control the computer using the terminal. This is SSH access. But we don't have complete access over the system because, as I mentioned before, on a Linux computer, a user called root is the main user of the computer. So it might be that the user mistyped the password. If I type history, I can see all the commands the user typed. So you see he typed different commands, and in this case there is no mistyped password here, right? You just see some passwords but nothing mistyped. We can try to get root using su, and then going through a password list again. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, QWERTY, password, and so on. And eventually we would find root if it's using one of the commonly used passwords. So this is just one of the ways to gain access to a system, is by using weak passwords. And the weak passwords isn't just like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, but any password that has been used before that is commonly used. For example, any of the passwords in the 40 million password list. And there's even larger lists like 150 million or sizes like that. So we can use a program, we can do it manually, which of course would be very cumbersome, or use a tool called Hydra to attack. Now, weak file permissions is another way, and a malicious program is one that the user installs that then gives you access to their computer. A network is just a range of computers which are connected. Just like in the real world, you have other things which are connected, and we speak about a network when the computers are connected. So when we talk about network security, we talk about the computer devices and the links connecting them. So it's about securing them. And when we talk about offensive security, we of course talk about gaining access to a sister system. Now, every computer in a network has a unique address called an IP address. So if I type ifconfig here, or type the command IP space adder space show, you'll see the unique address of your computer. Many times there's more than one computer in a network. Now you can scan for networks in the same network using ARP scan -L, and you need to run it as root. So in order to run it as root or administrator, type sudo in front, and you'll see there are several computers here on our network. So you'll see this is my computer, 0101. You'll see there's the main router here, .1, another computer, and another computer. So every device will have a unique IP address or internet address, and there's local addresses and public addresses. So in this case, these are local addresses, so just network addresses that exist in your computer, in your local network. And there's also public internet addresses. Now these numbers you'll see behind that are so-called MAC addresses, unique identifiers of the hardware. You'll see every device has a network card with a unique identifier. However, the more important ones to remember are the IP addresses, which you always use to connect or to scan anything. And another information you might see is like the companies, where do the devices come from. To see if any of the devices is online, you can use the ping command. So let me take a new window here. And we'll type ping with an IP address. So let's say .1. And if a device is online, it will show you 64 bytes from that address. So by online, we mean it's turned on. So you'll see once we try those, you'll see that not all devices here are online or replying to data, to the ping request. So you'll see not all of them are replying. So that's what you can do with the ping command. You can check if any of the devices in your local network or even online is running or is online. Now this works not just for IP addresses but also for internet web addresses, so domain names. For example, google.com, and you'll see google.com is actually an alias for an internet address. These internet addresses always consist of 4 numbers, and they start from 0 to 255 for every number. So this is called an Internet Protocol Address version 4. There is a new version of Internet Protocol addresses, IP version 6, but nobody is using that as far. So this is the IPv4 address, and this is for any website. And of course you can also ping a public IP address. So if we take the same address, you'll see you'll get reply from that. So you can use the ping command to check if any computer is online on the internet, and also on your local network. Local network addresses usually start with 192.168 or with 10.10. So those you can scan if they are online or not online. You can also scan for which services they are running. You can do that with a tool called Nmap. So using a tool called Nmap, you can check for open ports. You can think of ports like windows or holes through which you can connect to a computer. Just like a house where you have maybe several doors that you can use, maybe the back door, the front door. Some houses might not have a back door. So with a port scan, you make like an investigation to which ports exist in the computer. So we type 192. In this case, I'll take this first IP address and just run a scan. And it will tell you which ports are open, or if any ports are open. And if some ports are open, you know that you can connect to them. When talking about network attacks, what we often want to attack in a network or online is servers. So let's use this Linux computer as a server. First, we'll install some server applications. For example, you might want to run an SSH server. So SSH lets you remotely control computers, which is often installed in web servers. So we'll install the OpenSSH server on Ubuntu Linux. So you'll see now we installed the OpenSSH server. We might want to install some more programs. You'll see if we scroll here, we might want to install perhaps server. So let's say vs ftpd, and of course we can install any more services. So let's say screen sharing service. And actually in Ubuntu that is included by default, so there should be something like sharing. Okay, that's not included by default in old Ubuntu. Let's say that one. Desktop sharing. So okay, so we set up several services, and so we have a basic server in our network. Let's now start from the viewpoint of the attacker. So we know the IP address of our server, so of the server we want to attack. Now the first thing you'll want to do is to start port scanning. So you can do that with Nmap. we type in the IP address of the server, and you'll see it tells us which services are open. So in this case, it's running an SSH server, an FTP server, and a VNC server, which are the ones we just enabled, right? So whenever you have a server in your network, or perhaps an online one, you can scan which services it's running using this command, where you change the IP address to the IP address of your target. Now, one of the most interesting targets, of course, is SSH. FTP just lets you control files, VNC lets you do remote desktop, and SSH is a command line interface, but it allows you to completely control the computer. So SSH is what we'll target now. And we'll use a tool called Hydra. So that's a command line tool that's included in Kali Linux. If I press Hydra enter, you'll see with Hydra we need to specify the username and password list, so a list of passwords. We can use a list of 40 million passwords or larger lists, and then the target system or the target that you want to attack. So let me just run the nmap again and open a new window. You'll see we need to run Hydra, and the window got a bit too large. So we can run Hydra, and the target's username in this case is Ubuntu. Then we need to specify a password list, and by default there's a password list included in Kali Linux. So if you go to user, sorry, let me move this. If you go to user share word lists, you'll see there's a password list included, rocku.txt.gz. You can copy that to your home directory and then right click extract here, which will give you a huge list of passwords. It's 133 megabytes, and those are 14 million commonly used passwords. And so I can show you, if just like the first 100 or let's say 1000 lines, and you'll see those are commonly used passwords. And this file is actually huge, so you'll see this file is actually 14 million passwords. So we can use that file as our password list argument. So we'll say rocku.txt, and then our targets, for example, we wanted to attack SSH with the server's IP address. And you'll see it starts cracking. And at some point, it should find the password. It's going through this list of 14 million passwords and trying all of them. And you see, there we go. It just found the username password of the victim's server. So the next thing we can do is to log in over SSH. So let me just open a new tab. So that's Ubuntu at the server address. Yes, and then it wants the password. We can paste that in. And you'll see now we have complete access over the victim's computer. This is the same Ubuntu shell. So you'll see we are inside the computer. For example, we can go in the desktop and create some file. And you'll see we have complete access through the computer using the SSH protocol. Now you can use Hydra also to attack other protocols. For example, you can crack FTP if that's open. So we just cracked SSH, which is open. If FTP is open, you can launch the same kind of attack and see if you can find the password. And you can use the Hydra program on many different protocols. So not just these three, but any kind of database, any kind of screen sharing. It supports lots of protocols. So it's really great for password hacking servers. In this case, the password for the FTP server was the same. So you might want to connect to that using FTP, or well, now we're able to, because we know the password. So this allows you now to FTP protocol. So depending on what the server has opened, you can brute force attack. You can try to crack the passwords using a password list. Now, one thing to note is that it's a capital P here. So instead of instead of a lowercase, it's a capital P. If you use a lowercase, you will get all kind of strange errors. So use a capital P here, and this is -L with your file. Now this file must be in the same directory as you're running. So if I type pwd, you'll see I'm inside /home/kali. Let me close this. And inside home/kali, I have this rocku.txt file. So that file should be in the same directory, and then you can run the program with the username you want to attack and the password list. Now, of course, you can try regular usernames like names of systems like Ubuntu or Debian, or depending on the target server, maybe root, which is the administrator system that always exists in Linux computers. And you can also try to social engineer them, perhaps from LinkedIn, try to get the usernames or the names of the employees and use those. So there's different ways to get the usernames, so you can try and guess them, or perhaps use default ones. And then you can use a password list to just iterate it, to just go through that list. Well, Hydra does it for you, goes through that list of millions of passwords and trying one by one. Now on the internet you can find even larger password lists. So the one included in Kali Linux is 14 million long, but there are even larger ones. So every one of us uses programs on computers, or mobile phones for that matter. Now these programs, they run on the computers, and oftentimes they're stored on the computer. But it's possible to have programs that you don't need to install. So how does that work? If you have a web app, you just need the URL of the website to use the program. So in a typical website, you just have information. So this was the first introduction to the internet, where you have different links where you can click with images, but not any app, right? Just information presented. So the next step that came after that was building apps on the internet. So what are those apps? You can think of it like online banking apps, webmail app like google.com or Tutunota, so email service app, and all kind of things like Office 365, Excel, PowerPoint, Google Drive, online shopping. Even udemy.com is an app, right? It's not just a website. You can interact with it, you can search for products, you can create an account, you can browse around different categories. So it's really an app, but an app you don't need to install. So none of these apps you need to install off the computer, right? You can just go to the website and then start using the app. And you know it's an app because it's interactive. You have search, you have username, password, a shopping cart, and all those kind of things, depending on the app. Now, apps have different security vulnerabilities. So in this video, we'll look at the OWASP shop, and we'll go into different vulnerabilities that can exist, or different security risks. So one of the most obvious one is authentication and authentication failures. So when you have your login screen, for example, account login, it might be that the login is broken. Perhaps it's not checking the password at all, or it could be that there are weak passwords, such that it's easy to gain access to different user accounts. And so, for example, maybe commonly used passwords like 123456, QWERTY, and all those kind of passwords. So what you can do as an attack is, if you have an email address or a username, you can try with different words with a password list to gain access to the accounts. So that's one of the vulnerabilities. It can be that there's broken access control. For example, if a website has a URL where there's a parameter here, it might be that you're able to change that parameter in the URL and then gain access to, for example, other accounts. So let's say this is the URL where you have the user Fred, and then by changing, the user Karen, and then just by changing the URL itself, you gain access to another account. So broken access control. It's another vulnerability. Now, there can be other vulnerabilities, for example, database vulnerabilities, or maybe the computer where the website is running, called the server. It's outdated software or weak passwords itself. So there's different ways to hack into web apps and different ways to go about it. So let's just do in the most basic one, which is like identification errors or authentication vulnerabilities. So in this case, we have a shop, OWASP shop, which has an email and a password. Now, we know neither the email and the password, but let's try to browse around in the website and see if we can find any email. So perhaps in the About Us, you'll see some links here. So not there. Perhaps in the reviews here, product reviews, and you'll see, okay, we got an email address. So copy that email address, and it's likely that that one is used for login. So we could have also guessed admin@ushop. And we don't know the password, of course. So what we can do is try and brute force the password. So using a password list, try and gain access. Now, Kali Linux includes many password lists. If we go to user share word lists, there is the RockU list, which is like 40 million passwords. But there's also other lists. So let's see. We have some word list here, a short list that you can try to use, and many other lists. So depending on which list you want to use. For example, the top 100 passwords might be a list we could try. So in order to launch the attack, we need a tool. Of course, we could use Hydra, but for this example, we'll use the Burp Suite, which is a tool for hacking websites. So search for Burp Suite and start it. It will show you several pop-ups. So you can ignore all those pop-ups and just click Next. It will just take a moment to start. You'll see this pop-up, click Next, and click Start Burp. So the way Burp works is by intercepting your web browser traffic, so Chrome or Firefox or whichever browser you're using, and then you're able to manipulate what it's sending. So how does it work? First we go to Proxy, click on Proxy and click Open Browser. That will start the web browser. So in this case it's using Chrome. Then we'll click Intercept this off so that we can browse to the website. Now we can minimize this and open it in Burp. So here we go. This is the same website, and we need to have the email address we had before. Copy that. And the password, type anything you want. And what we'll do is to intercept the web browser. So click Intercept this on and click Login. You'll see now it intercepted the web request. It's trying to send a message to this address on this server, on this website, and it's trying to send the email with this password. And what we can do is now to send it to the intruder. So right click, send to intruder. Inside the intruder screen, we click on positions. We click on clear with the symbol here, so clear. Then around the password, so select it. Click the add with the symbol here. And that automatically adds that symbol on just behind and after that password. Next we'll go to payloads. And we have a simple list, a password list. So we want to load that list, so click load. And we'll go to the user share passwords directory. So inside Metasploit and the top 100 passwords. So you'll see that automatically adds those passwords to this list. And the next thing we need to do is just to click Start Attack. So that will start trying all those passwords one by one. So if I click on any, you'll see it tries the password with that password in that list. So it's trying every password one by one. And if it finds the correct password, you can just sort by status, and that will show the password if it has been found. Now obviously it can take a while depending on the list, and it might be that the password is not one of the 100 most common passwords. So it's important to try with a large list of passwords. So the larger your list, the more chance you have that it will actually find the password. So in this case it didn't find the password yet, but it just keeps trying the passwords for that username. And you'll see it's trying every password one by one. And if it eventually finds the password, it will change the status or the length. So you're able to sort by the status and length. And once it finds it, you can use it to log into the Juice shop. Now of course you would have to go back to the proxy and click intercept is off in order to start browsing normally again. Otherwise it would keep intercepting your web traffic.